So this next video is Asmongold's first impressions of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, it's important to mention that this one is kind of like been a long time coming. We've been following the progression up until this point. I've been pretty much following this ever since there was the potential that, you know, kind of like, you guys remember we reacted to Asmongold's reaction to the Endwalker video. And I thought that it was very telling that when he saw that video, he was going from like, oh man, I don't like the music. Oh, these cat girls, dude. These cat girls. What's up with fucking cat girls, dude? Like, he was being super negative about it. But then by the end of the video, he was going like, we're going to the moon, boys. It went from like being mega negative and critical about it to the end of it. He was going like, we're going to the moon, boys. So that was kind of the first foreshadowing that he would potentially try it out. And ever since then, I've been curious because, like, I even said I didn't think that he was going to like it all that much because of the fact that, you know, Realm Reborn and all of the Final Fantasy expansions, they have a lot of cinematics. And, you know, if you look at the way that he plays World of Warcraft, he just farms stuff. He doesn't really care that much about cinematics or whatever. Every now and then he'll watch like a lore video or whatever. But 14 actually does its storytelling properly. You don't need to go watch lore videos. You can get more details from lore videos and whatnot, but you don't have to. Like the essence of the plot is there, and you'll be able to understand it if you go through. So I was expecting him to get to like those big cinematic moments where there's just like a bunch of text and him just going like, oh man, I don't feel like dealing with this and whatever. That hasn't happened. That was like very surprising to me. That was very surprising that he's actually been going through and watching it and enjoying it. And I've always said, it's like, look, if he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. It doesn't matter. And that people shouldn't really care too much about whether, you know, if he doesn't feel like playing it, he shouldn't play it. And people are all up in arms and say, oh my God, he likes it, he doesn't like it. And people even like tried stopping him from enjoying the game. I don't know if you guys watched that, but it was very disappointing to see that. To see like people trying to actively block quest NPCs for him with the huge mounts. People try to like steal his quest mobs to prevent him from completing quests. That was disgusting. That was, oh my God, dude. That was some of the most heinous shit I've ever seen. It was ridiculous. And I can guarantee you right now that that is a minority when it comes to the Final Fantasy XIV community. Very much a minority. And it was really sad to see it. It was very sad to see it. And they got banned too, right, Silver Nitro? They got banned. And I'm happy. Like, fuck them. Fuck them. Ban them. Ban them forever for all I care. Fuck them. So like, why? Why try to ruin the experience of a new player coming to the game? It's almost like they're trying to gatekeep the game so fucking hard that Asmongold can't try it. I thought that was really fucking dumb. There was gatekeeping on Twitter as well. Dude, but I mean, come on. Twitter, we can't take Twitter too seriously. Let's be real here. You know, it's like Twitter's gonna Twitter, and Reddit is gonna be Reddit. I would actually imagine that a majority of the people that were fucking with him in his starter experience, the ones that were actually trying to like block, because there's also people that just want to go there and like spam abilities and show him cool mounts and stuff like that because they're excited about him trying out their game. There's a lot of people like that, but there are people like genuinely killing his mobs, obstructing the NPCs. Fuck them. And I would imagine that a majority of those people are probably from Reddit. I'm sorry. That's my experience. But either way, he persevered. He continued onwards, and it's been really interesting to see the progress. I haven't watched, his entire playthroughs because obviously that's like hours upon hours upon hours. But I'm super happy about the fact that he's been enjoying it. I think that is cool. If he hadn't been enjoying it, I wouldn't necessarily been unhappy. It's like, hey, whatever, it wasn't for him. Who cares? That's the thing. Who cares? Doesn't really matter. But due to the fact that I have been following it, I'm very curious to see what his take is going to be. So let's see what's going on here.
What's up, boys? Today I want to talk to y'all about my first impressions about Final Fantasy XIV. I just got done playing the game for about, I'm really not sure about how many hours. I think I played it total about 30, 40 hours, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more. And I'm like level 43, almost done with the Realm Reborn. And I wanted to give those real.
He doesn't know about the patch quests. Almost done with Realm Reborn. Yeah, right. I'm level 43. I'm almost done.
Actual legitimate first impressions of the game, what I thought was good, what I thought was bad, and everything else in between. Now, overall, I want to say that the experience of playing the game and like the meta around it, not just the game, but like me streaming the game, people talking about me playing the game, that shit has blown me away. Holy shit, you guys love this. Like, I didn't expect to get like over 200,000 viewers.
Yeah, that
playing
was
the game on
insane.
my
His
first
first
day. That was
stream.
incredible. Thank you.
That
If you
was
watched that stream,
insane.
I really appreciate it. And people have come back. They've come back every day to watch. I really do appreciate that too. That is incredible. It's so weird to me, right? Because for the longest time, I just streamed WoW. I just played WoW. And now I'm playing Final Fantasy as well. And then, oh shit, now New World's coming out. And then, oh, wait a minute, Ashes of Creation Alpha is coming out before that. And it's like, oh my god. You know, when it rains, it pours. That's basically the way that I feel. So it's a good thing, by the way. Rainy day keeps the shower away. So anyway, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the positives and negatives about the game. I think that the worst thing about Final Fantasy XIV is buying the game. And I really mean this. I think that is the genuine worst thing about it. Using their website and trying to figure out oh, well, you have a Square Enix account, but you don't have a Final Fantasy account. Oh, well, you have to buy this, but if you buy it on Steam, then it's different. Like, what the fuck? Like, just make it simple. It's like Blizzard, okay? Like, one thing that they do.
He's actually like, let me tell you something. I had a friend of mine, I think I've told this story before. I had a friend of mine who had a trial account for Final Fantasy XIV, and he lost his password. This was a long time ago. He lost his password to his account. He didn't know exactly which email it was associated with, but here's the thing. It's associated with his PlayStation account, because it's on the PlayStation. Because, like, if you think it's complicated on the PC, okay? If you think this shit's complicated on the PC, wait until you try playing it on the PlayStation, okay? It's even worse. Because, like, you associate your PlayStation account with the Square Enix account, and after you do that association, it's for life. It's like marriage, okay? Your PlayStation account is associated with that Square Enix account forever. You can't change that. You cannot change it, okay? So, yeah, real marriage. You can't even get a divorce. You're just like, for life. So, this friend of mine had the account associated, and we were just like, okay, that's fine. Just create a new Square Enix account. We'll associate again. That's when I found out you can't actually do that. You can't do it. So, I had to find out which email his account was associated with. I found out he didn't have that email anymore. So, I was like, okay, this is a problem. So, I messaged Square Enix support, and I had to spend like a whole day going through Square Enix support until eventually someone just said, hey, you know what? I get it. You guys are having a tough time. Here, I'm just going to reset the password, and here you go. And he just like they just reset the password for me at some point, and I was able to just like tell him, look, dude, here's your password. It's reset, whatever. Like, that was the whole thing. So, yeah, I can imagine. And even I myself, I've been confused a bunch of times because I've gotten codes from like Square Enix, right? Because, I've asked them for codes for Shadowbringers or game time codes and whatnot. And I always disclose that on my streams. So, and the first time that I was trying to put a code in, I couldn't find the place to put the time code in. This should not be that complicated. I would go to a place where I would try to put in a code, and the game and the site would say, code invalid. And I'd go back to them and tell, hey guys, the code is invalid. They'd be like, no, you're putting it in the wrong place. And I'm like, what do you mean? There's a place here. It says to put a code. They're like, yeah, but you have to go to this other place to put the code. And I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, there's some issues there. There's some issues there. Is Monster Stories co-op? It has co-op quests that you can do, but the main quest you do solo. But yeah, he's got a point there. I can understand the frustration.
Right? Is they make it easy to give them money, okay? And I would love if Square Enix could at least get their shit together a little bit with that, because I'll be honest, it took me 2 or 3 hours to try to figure out how all to do all that stuff.
It's okay. Look, it's complicated. It's not 2 or 3 hours complicated. Okay.
I had to buy one of the games twice. It was really annoying. And just overall, it's confusing, it's contrived, and it's hard to understand, I think, for many people. And I think that also, especially with so many people coming into the game now because of the state of WoW and just in general people talking about it and Endwalker coming out in November, there's going to be a lot of people excited to play the game. And what an awful barrier to entry if giving them money is hard to do. So I really think they need to redo their payment system and the way that that works, and just make it easier for people to understand. But other than that, there aren't really a whole lot of like really big negatives. I remember the 2.5 second GCD. This is something that I was kind of I was
Not a
very
problem at
skeptical
all.
that this would be a problem, because I assumed that whenever you
I've
have
talked
a
about
GCD
that.
that's quite long like that, there are always going to be abilities like interrupts, like stuns, etc., that have to be split second abilities that you would use in between that. So it's not really like a 2.5 second GCD. It's
And for people that still don't know how 14 works and they're wondering like, okay, so 2.5 seconds does seem like a long time. Like, let me just explain to you. When you get to the later levels, you're going to wish that the global cooldown was longer. And I'm not exaggerating that. You're going to wish the global cooldown was longer because you're going to have so many things that you want to do in between the global cooldown. You're not going to be able to do all of them until you fully master your class, because there's just so many things. Not to mention the global cooldown can also be reduced by getting skill speed. So whenever you get gear that's got skill speed, it's going to reduce. Like on my Paladin, for instance, I think the global cooldown on my Paladin is like 2.39 or something like that. So yeah. And, you know, it makes it harder. You're just going to have so many abilities that you want to do in between that global cooldown that sometimes the global cooldown will come back up and you still won't have all of your abilities done.
like every 2.5 seconds you use a main ability, and then you can use filler abilities inside of that, which is effectively the way the game works. And I think that the combat seems fine. The lack of add-ons is definitely odd for me as a WoW player. It's harder for me to get used to that, because as a WoW player, the first thing you do if you're playing a game, it's like, oh, well, I can't play this on your computer because it doesn't have my 15 different add-ons with.
Yeah, imagine a company actually making a usable UI. Because you see, just like Zach said, I tell this to people and they tell me that I'm full of shit. People that play World of Warcraft, I can't believe that some people that play World of Warcraft, when I talk to them about this, they tell me like, oh, you're exaggerating. It is not that bad. When I tell them, they're like, look, the default UI for World of Warcraft is literally unplayable. Like if you want to, play your class to any extent of efficiency, the default UI is unplayable. And Zach just said it right here. He's like, look, I can't play my game on your computer because you don't have my UIs, my UI add-ons. And it's like, in 14, you don't need that because you can literally customize the entirety of your UI from inside the game, and you can make it usable to whatever thing that you prefer, which is great. Zeppela told him that third-party programs are kind of forbidden. It's not really that big of a deal. I mean, the developers just say that so that if they need to ban someone because they're using cheating software, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They'll go in there and they're like, hey, dude, you were using some auto-clicker nonsense. You can't do that. Boom, done. Banned instantly. Whereas, in World of Warcraft, they have to be more like, well, this add-on's okay, this add-on's not okay. In 14, it's like, you don't need add-ons to play our game. Boom, done. I think the only times people have been banned for using add-ons is like when they start bad-mouthing other players because their damage is not up to snuff and they're using like ACT to track their damage.
my 50 different settings and my 30 different weak auras and my 8
Yeah,
different like
exactly.
calibrations here. Like, it's very, very complicated. And with Final Fantasy, you're just using the base default UI, and of course there are a few things you can get that are more advanced, that are apparently add-ons, etc. But I haven't really wasted my time doing that because I just don't really find it necessary. Well, anyway, I want to go through each of the different tenets of the game and talk about what my first impressions of them were. Now, the first thing is the story. And I think the story is actually very interesting in the way that it's told, because I was thinking a lot about this. And what is the difference, and why is it that Final Fantasy, it's easier to tell a story in Final Fantasy, and why does it do that? Because people told me that A Realm Reborn was going to suck. And I'm like, if the questing sucks, there's no way it can be worse than Classic WoW. And I was right. It wasn't that bad. It was completely fine. And I read a few threads about this, and people are talking about, oh man, he's never going to be able to do this 3 quests that are super boring. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've done that for weeks on like 10 levels before in Classic WoW. It's been no big deal for me personally as a as you know as an older player, but I can definitely see where the monotony would absolutely set in. But anyway, why is it that the dungeons, why is not dungeons, excuse me, the why the quests and the story in Final Fantasy, why is it that those things are told in such a more easily digestible format than what they do in WoW? And I think the difference is very simple. It's the difference between a tweet and a twit longer. And WoW tells their story in twit longers, and Final Fantasy tells their stories in tweets. Basically, what I mean by that is that whenever you are listening to the Final Fantasy dialogue, it is giving you information in this about this much of a little box, right? Meanwhile, whenever you do WoW, it's this much of a box. And you read the first 2 lines and you're like, okay, what's the objective? But in Final Fantasy, because
Exactly.
many times the information is very short and it's presented to you in very bite-sized formats, it makes it easier to digest for the user, and I think that it also makes it easier for people to understand the story because it's being given to them in these very specific increments. And
Because it's actually in the game and it's not in a fucking book. That would be the explanation.
And I think also creating the dialogues between the different characters and the in-game cutscenes does give people a better way to personify who those characters are and give a better idea of who's saying what and who feels what way. So I do think it really matters to do that. And in Final Fantasy, I really do feel that they've done a very good job with that. Now, another element with this, so storytelling overall, I think that it is great. I like the storytelling. And one of the things about the storytelling that I think is very interesting, and this is something that probably one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this video is to share this idea that I've had, is that I believe that storytelling is actually one of the reasons why Final Fantasy doesn't have as much of a, quote, toxic community as World of Warcraft. And I don't necessarily think this is maybe entirely true in all ways, but I want to draw a distinction between the way that Final Fantasy deals with antagonists versus the way that World of Warcraft deals with antagonists. Almost every single time in Final Fantasy, especially in the early quests, that you have an antagonist, there is a point where the antagonist comes to a realization that they have done something wrong, and then after that, there is generally a point of mercy where people think, oh, well, he gets it, he understands, we're going to give him a second chance. So, in so many cases, in Final Fantasy, there is a element of forgiveness. There is an element of redemption. Whereas in World of Warcraft, there is an element of retribution and execution much more often than there is. And I think that just telling a narrative in the way that you create the idea that people are, redeemable.
I completely disagree that this is. I completely that this has any effect on the communities of the game. I could be wrong, but I disagree that that is a thing. And it doesn't happen all the time, although it does happen quite often that there are characters that get their redemption arcs and whatnot. There are also characters that are just villains because they're villains, But I don't think that that has necessarily an effect on the community. I don't think.
And you have somebody does something really bad, everybody's really mad at them, and they're given forgiveness. I think that in a very, very subtle way, sets the tone for interactions in the game. And I think in a way that does kind of create a paradigm in which to interact with each other in the game. And I think that having that narrative where players are not just instantly executed for doing something wrong, or most quest lines do not end in the person that's causing the trouble being put in jail or destroyed or killed or something like that. I think the end result of that is a more understanding player base because they've been conditioned to feel that way through the narratives in the game. And I find it very interesting that that's the case. And I've seen that more and more and more because whenever I was first questing, it's like, oh, well, this guy's doing some stupid shit. Man, all right, I can't wait to kill him at the end of it. And then at the end of it, they just give him a pat on the back and they say, listen, man, we knew you were misunderstood. Hopefully you can get your shit back together. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were going to take him to the back of the barn and shoot him. And it doesn't even happen. And I think it's a very subtle and it's a very removed way of thinking about things, especially whenever you're taking narrative decisions in the story and comparing them to player behavior. But I do think that it does rub off in a very specific way, especially with how important many of the players in Final Fantasy view the story. So let's go ahead and talk about combat. I actually think combat it's about the same, really. I think WoW has great combat. That's really the truth. I think that it's got really, really well-designed combat. It's extremely responsive. When you hit a button, it does something, and there's no delay at all about it. And I think that even some of the most staunch Blizzard dislikers, let's just say, not haters, just dislikers, some of the most staunch Blizzard dislikers they're going to have to admit that like Blizzard and World of Warcraft is an extremely responsive game. Unless you have more than 5 players in an area. But other than that, if you're just playing with a few other people, it is extremely responsive. When you hit a button, your character does something immediately. And I think that is one element of Blizzard quality that has actually stood the test of time. So Final Fantasy, I think, is close to that. It definitely is. But especially with like off GCD abilities like interrupts and stuns, I don't think that they have the same responsiveness that World of Warcraft does. But that could
I find it interesting because the first time that I played through Final Fantasy, I complained about this. And everybody that I spoke to in my chat always told me, nope, works fine for me. I have absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. And I've always said, like, it doesn't, like, even now that I've played all of these hours, there are some things about the OGCD that I press the button and I don't feel like it happens. Like, he's 100% correct. Like, I'm telling you right now, and I've talked about this. When I was going through the story, I would tell people, like, there were even instances where because I wasn't expecting that to happen, I would die because I would press a cooldown and it wouldn't happen. It was weird, though, because I felt like with keyboard, that wasn't as much of an issue. I felt that issue more with controller because there was a time where I tried playing with a keyboard. And when I was playing with a keyboard, I felt it was more responsive. And I'm pretty sure that he's playing mouse and keyboard. So when I play with a controller, I feel that it is definitely less responsive. And that is one of the things. So it's like, for instance, for me, the two things that I usually put in between my rotation as a paladin is you got to do Circle of Scorn and Spirits Within. Those two got to always be on cooldown. And the way that I do it is like, let me get a controller that's not hooked up. It's this one. And the way that I do it is like, I'll do my rotation pressing one. Usually I'll spam my rotation because even the rotation sometimes like it won't do it. So I'll go like, okay, I need to do my X, tap, 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 tap. Need to do my square, I need to do my, and then when I'm doing the OGCDs, I go like, until both the GCDs come off, and then I'll stop. Like, it's insane, but yeah, I go really hard. I have to, this is how I get carpal tunnel, is trying to weave in the OGCDs. I have to really spam them to get them off with a controller. I don't know what is the deal with that. It's never felt 100% right for me. It's not a problem anymore, because like now I've kind of gotten used to it, and it's not like I'm playing Ultimates or Savage or whatever, and if I miss like a Circle of Scorn or a Spirits Within in the middle of my rotation, it's not a big deal. But, it is a little bit frustrating. So, yeah.
also just be me not really understanding it quite as well. I think I'll probably have to give you guys an update on that once I hit level 80. Now, in terms of goals in the game, my goals in Final Fantasy, I think that some people before I started playing the game did not believe this, but my goals in Final Fantasy are to clear ultimate fights. I'm not planning on hitting level 80 and then quitting the game. And I think more and more, the more that I know life, the worst parts of the questing experience, and still somehow manage to enjoy them, the more that some of my more fervent detractors will have to come to the realization that that might actually happen. So I'm very excited about that. Honestly, I've been watching some of the fights just on different people's channels, etc. And I am so excited to do the raids. I think they're so cool. And it's the thing is with me and WoW is like I used to really, really love to raid. And the worst part about raiding for me is the other people, right? Like, I love doing the fights.
Exactly.
But whenever I've got Billy the dipshit who just keeps standing in the fire, and I'm spending 3 hours of my day, 3 days a week, waiting on Billy to figure out that the fire's hot, I'm not necessarily having a good time. So that's been a big problem that I've had with WoW raiding. And Final Fantasy, you have less people in Ultimates. I think it's 8 people instead of 20 in Mythics. So hopefully we can be a little bit more specific in who we're going to invite in and who we're going to let in. And I really am actually looking forward to progressing through the Mythic system, or not Mythic, the Ultimate and Savage and I think Extreme systems for some of the older fights in Final Fantasy. Like, this is something that I'm genuinely excited about and genuinely looking forward to. And it's not even really about the armor. Like, the armor is cool, and don't get me wrong, like we're definitely going to be talking about the armor a little bit here, but it's mostly just about being able to do the fights. I feel like many of the fights in Final Fantasy have not really challenged me, I feel like, as a player, and so I'm really waiting to get to that point where
it's not really going to be challenging until you get to like Shadowbringers, because at least for me, I just felt like my character was so powerful that unless there's like one of those mechanics that will kill you in one hit, like some kind of a Doom mechanic or something like that, I don't think it was that challenging. Unless you're doing minimum item level, then it's a different question. But unless it's got like one-shot stuff, usually most fights were not really a problem, I feel like. Yeah, if you do minimum item level, that's a completely different conversation.
I'm like, fuck, okay, this is actually hard. And I'm not, the greatest player ever, so I think that it will probably happen at a certain point, probably soon. Other than that, I think mounts are definitely very interesting in Final Fantasy, considering the fact that all of them can fly, and it's not just the ones with wings. There is literally an elephant that flies. So this is it is a little bit silly to me. I'm going to be honest with you. It is a little bit silly to me, but it's one of those things you don't really think about a whole lot. I don't really give a shit.
It's not a big deal.
It was something that I thought would be more annoying than it was, and the reason why I think it's not that annoying is Final Fantasy is like, it's basically the highest form of fantasy fiction that there is. So you have like these giant airships, these giant monsters with metallic metal swords that are coming out, and they're like katanas, and there's fire coming off of them. And then you see an elephant flying around, and it's like, yeah, of course the elephant's flying. It's not that big of a deal. So in the scope of Final Fantasy, elephants literally flying, pigs flying, is actually not that crazy at all. So I'm really worried about that too much. Then in terms of the community has been, you guys know, my community experiences in Final Fantasy have been very colorful. And
yeah, I bet
there has been a lot of people that have been a little bit annoying, but shout out to Square Enix. They've actually done a good job at trying to at least try to give me as much of a normal experience as possible. There were a number of people trying to grief me, and just
imagine developers actually caring. Actually, not even developers, community managers. Imagine not firing your community managers and like churning them over every month. Like, so just think about it, right? Blizzard churns their community managers every month. It's like, why the fuck should they care? Why should a Blizzard community manager care? He's not going to be there for more than a month. Checks in the mail next month and he's fired. And they know. They know they're not going to be there next month. They get hired. They have like a monthly contract. So they know they're not going to be there next month. So why the fuck should they care? Hey, Blizzard, guess what? You get what you fucking pay for. Pay people some fucking wages. How about that? Pay people a decent living wage and don't fire someone every fucking month. It's not that hard. They just have fucking community managers that have been working on the game for a decent amount of time. It's not that hard. So if people work on a game that they care about and they know they're not going to get fired next month, the end result is they care more about their job. But if they think that next month they're not going to be there, they're not going to give a fuck about their job. And Blizzard literally recycles their team like every other month. Hell nah, Bobby needs that new yacht. Yeah, he needs a yacht for his yacht. Yacht on top of yacht.
Stream snipe me and just generally be annoying as possible, like try to get on the screen and cover up as much of my screen as possible so I couldn't see anything. And they did do a good job. The GMs did a great job at kind of taking care of those people and putting them in timeout, which is something that I was very, very glad about, and something that, in my opinion, should happen in all games. And either way, community has been, I think, completely fine. I think Final Fantasy definitely it's hit the mark of being that place that you can log in and hang out in. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the more casual MMORPG players definitely feel at home with, because they can log in, hang out with their friends, maybe do a quest, maybe do a dungeon or something like that, and there's not as much of high stakes with it. And I think that high stakes is another element. This is probably the last thing that I want to talk about with the Final Fantasy First Impressions, is high stakes is definitely it's a spectrum. And so let's talk about really, really, really high stakes. Let's talk about Classic WoW with full world buffs. If you wipe the raid in Classic WoW with full world buffs, people are fucking pissed. They are furious because they've spent hours preparing for this, and especially before the Chronoboon Displacers, they had to log off all week to make sure that they didn't lose these buffs so they could do the raid the following Tuesday. And then finally they get to the raid and somebody fucks it up and they lose all of their work that they've been looking forward to for the entire week. So you have that much loss and you can lose that much, and you get massive toxicity. You have people that get really, really angry about that because they lose so much through wiping. And also, I think a little bit of a lesser extent here, let's talk about Mythic Plus. Why is Mythic Plus a little bit more toxic than, let's say, Dungeons in Final Fantasy? It's very simple, because if you fuck up a dungeon in Final Fantasy, you just get somebody else in the group and it's not a big deal. But if you fuck up a Mythic Plus, you lose your key and it gets depleted. So the element of scarcity, the element of loss, is a little bit more prevalent in World of Warcraft, and because of that, that scarcity creates pressure, and that pressure creates toxicity. And I think Final Fantasy takes the pressure off in a lot of those cases and doesn't create those lose conditions that are so punishing for players that it makes them resent each other. And I think that is a very, very impactful thing. And I actually think that Blizzard should look at that and try to create more challenging boss fights, and rather than creating more punishing boss fights. I'd rather be challenged than punished. I guess that's kind of a good way to look at it. But of course, there's a lot more to it as well. But anyway, my experience...
He does have a good point, like, about the whole Mythic Plus thing. I'm also not a big fan of the time element of Mythic Plus. So, like, I like the idea of replaying dungeons over and over because it's always been my favorite thing to do in World of Warcraft. I've always talked about this. Like, my favorite thing is always 5-man content. I love doing 5-man content because it's just easier to get people to do a 5-man dungeon, get people together, go do the 5-man dungeon. Like, it's just fun. You just go in there and you do the dungeon and you get some loot and you're good to go. What has Blizzard done with Mythic Plus? They removed a chunk of the loot. You know, it's got a time limit on it. If you fuck up the time limit, you get even less loot. You don't time your key. You have all of these problems with Mythic Plus, and there's very little reward. And it's still, at the end of the day, despite all these limitations, players who progress through Mythic Plus are still treated like secondhand citizens. Like, just look at the chains of the what's it called again? The sockets of domination, whatever. The domination system that they're putting into 9.1, where only raiders get the sockets of domination. So again, Mythic Plus is treated as a second-class citizen type of deal. You don't even get access to the best possible gear, but you have to deal with all of these time limitations and all of this other bullshit. The only difficulty of raiding, the things that make raiding more difficult than Mythic Plus is quite simply the number of people. Like, that's it. It's the number of people involved. If you can get 20 people to work together, you can do raiding just fine. It's not that big of a deal. And I find it interesting that, like, just because there's less people involved in a Mythic Plus, somehow Blizzard has to look down on it. Like, you know, the people doing Mythic Plus are pieces of shit. It's like, no, fuck you. Eat a shit sandwich, motherfucker. You don't make this timer, we take your loot away. You don't time this key, we take your loot away. And by the way, at the end of the week with the vault, we're gonna take your loot away then too, if you don't do enough of these Mythic Plus things. It's like, come on, dude. The requirements are ridiculous. And here's the thing. I do Mythic Plus for fun when I was doing well. I would constantly go into Mythic Plus that I had no interest in terms of loot or whatever, or even giving me any progression, just to go get gear for other people and just have a good time and hang out with friends. But Blizzard still looks at Mythic Plus people as second-class citizens. It's like, figure your shit out, Blizzard. Like, seriously, I'm being genuine here. Just figure it out. It's so dumb. Like, yeah, like Asmon said, it'd be cool to have something that is challenging and not punishing. Like, you know, it's the punishment for wiping on a raid in retail WoW? Nothing. There's no punishment. You go and you do the boss again. If you wipe enough times, you'll have to clear the trash again. But let's be real. 90% of trash is tank and spank. Who the fuck cares? You got to do the trash again. Yeah, it's a little bit of a waste of time, but at the end of the day, who cares?
Overall with the game has actually been very good. I've had fun with it. I've enjoyed it. My stream has enjoyed it, and it's a great feeling as a streamer. I'm sure you guys, you know, if you stream before, you'd know this, but even if you haven't, it's very easy to relate to this or understand this, that it's a great feeling that you get involved with a game and you really like playing a game, and it turns out that your stream really likes watching it. There's no weird thing where you're playing this game that you don't want to and you're doing it because of your stream. No. Or it's no thing where you're, you know, playing this game that you do want to and your stream's hating it and they're complaining about it. And I think that's great. I'm really happy about it. And I've also, like, one thing that's really been heartening for me and very positively uplifting is the fact that I've had a lot of people that are, you know, they're first-time Final Fantasy viewers, and they're willing to try out, you know, and give my WoW content a chance. You know, watch a transmog comp, or, you know, watch a new dungeon or something like that, and just try to enjoy the content and appreciate the genre of MMOs for what it has to be, rather than tribalism that I think has actually just made it's made the entire space worse. It's made the community worse as a whole. And I think one of my main goals with all of this is to try to give people the perspective that you can love multiple games, you can have fun in multiple games, and you can appreciate multiple games. It doesn't necessarily have to be a zero-sum environment. And yeah. I've really enjoyed playing this other game. It's been super fun for me. I'm super excited for Ashes of Creation. I'm even excited about other games like Palia and Crowfall too, and as well as like other RPGs too. I think that playing Final Fantasy has given me a lot of confidence with streaming, and I'm very glad that it's gone so well, and I look forward to doing other games similar to that as well in the future. So I want to say thank you guys, everybody who's been so supportive and everything. I've really enjoyed playing the game, and also I look forward to continuing playing as well. And so overall, it's been a pretty fun experience. It's been more fun than I had expected, and I've actually just enjoyed myself. It's really just that simple. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you very much for watching. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on about it. I know a lot of people have talked to me about it already, but I wanted to make a video and just kind of share a little bit more of a expanded view of how I felt about the game. So anyway, guys, overall, TLDR, game good. Thank you all very much for watching. Really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.
There Peace. You go. Yep. I'm again, like I said at the start of this, I'm surprised that he's enjoying it as much as he is, but I'm happy.
Why
I'm happy for him. Whoa.
And WoW.
Relax. I'm happy that he's enjoying it, and he's having a good time with it. I think that's a positive thing for everyone involved, as far as I'm concerned. If he wasn't enjoying it, it wouldn't have been a big deal. He should have just, like, you know, if he wasn't enjoying it, he should have been able to just go back to WoW, and that would be that. But, you know, people have to make such a big deal out of this. And I know that I'm saying this as someone who is, like, reacting to the content and all of that stuff, but I'm reacting it because I'm so incredibly curious. Not necessarily because I'm invested on whether he likes it or doesn't like it. I'm just, like, mega curious. Like, if he didn't like it, I wouldn't be mad. If he likes it, I am, you know, I am happier, I guess, because, he likes it. It's cool. But if he didn't like it, I'd be like, okay, it's fine. It's not for him. It's not the end of the day. Like I always say, games should be made for a certain amount of people. They shouldn't just try to appeal to the widest possible community as possible. So if someone doesn't like a game that I like, it's whatever.